This is Ari Kaplan, and I'm speaking today with Alex Bajwa, a solo practitioner in St. Paul, Minnesota, who's been experimenting with reinventing the practice of law. Hi, Alex. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to chat with you. Before we start, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I graduated from Hamline University in 2008, and I actually got bar accepted the same year. And through kind of a process of some soul searching and having the wonderful timing with the recession, I ended up actually starting my own practice that December. And I've probably spent about a year and a half that time since then. I just thought, I'll get through the bad economy, get back to the job market, and just kind of go in the more traditional ways that I thought I was going to go at first. But about a year and a half ago, when I sat down and really decided, I'm going to make this law firm a full business and really pursue it and try and reinvent a new law firm, or am I going to go back into the job pool? I just decided, I enjoy working for myself too much, and I think there are so many great things that a solo practitioner can do to really push how law firms are doing business and how law firms are working with clients.
Can you tell us a little bit about the upside and downside of starting a practice right out of school?
Well, I had worked in a few law firms actually going back to high school. So I had some working idea of just how it worked day to day, just as far as administering some of the practice management work and the actual legal work. What actually was the hardest for me was getting used to the idea that I actually had to sell myself and realizing that once I was a solo practitioner, more than half my job was really a sales job. And law school doesn't prepare anyone for that, and working under other attorneys never prepared me for that, and getting used to just the same thing that I think every other new business owner has to work with, which is figuring out how to get clients or how to get customers and how to sell themselves while also doing what they're specialized at and what they love. I would say downside, and I don't think it changes whether you're just coming out of law school or whether you're starting a solo practice after a few years working at a firm. It's the stability was definitely an issue as far as income. It was weird getting used to not having that, paycheck every 2 weeks and getting used to the stress of, well, I guess this month is going to be a $25 month and hoping that next month would cover that. The stability was definitely the biggest difficulty.
But on balance, you feel that it's a worthy pursuit.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. It's great to be able to work on my terms and to work with clients on my terms. I can always work on my schedule because my boss is always okay with it. And I know that I'm actually a night person. I do a lot of my best work at night. That was something that was actually always taught to integrate with a traditional law firm that wanted me to be in from, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or more. But my best contract drafting, my best document drafting generally happens from about 10 p.m. at night to about 5 in the morning. That's just when my brain works best.
So I read with great interest your post on lawyerist.com about experimenting with name your own price arrangements. Tell us about that.
Well, it was an idea I had been playing with for a little while, and I was actually talking to a friend of mine who kind of handles my social media marketing and my website. He just finally said, you know what, you've joked about it for a while, you should just do it. You should just go out there and find out what people really think is an affordable and fair price for what you do. And so I really decided about mid-April that I was going to do it. We unveiled it May 1st, so it was actually kind of quick. And I think part of the reason I did that was so I was really, really nervous about doing it. And I talked to a couple attorneys who told me it was a terrible idea. So I did it quickly, I think, just to make sure that I steeled my nerves and stuck with it. And it was kind of a crazy idea that I think actually turned out really well.
So tell us how you executed on that. You put up a video. I saw a fantastic video that you put up, and I heard you tell clients that for this month only, you would offer your services at a price that they themselves would determine. How did you execute on that?
Well, how the process worked was it actually started off like I was working with any other client. I asked people to come in. We went through an initial consultation, kind of looked at, and I did it for both my will and estate planning personal clients and for my business clients. We sat down with the consultation, talked about their needs, and figured out what work they needed done. And, they knew that at some point they got to name their own price because that's what I had been advertising. How it actually worked on an execution level is they signed a retainer agreement that was a normal retainer agreement, outlining that I represented them, outlining what work was being done. And in the retainer agreement, rather than having a fee set out on the retainer agreement, they agreed that once the matter was closed, they would come back and have essentially a debriefing consultation with me, where they would be given a payment agreement. In the payment agreement, they would be free to write down whatever number they wanted for what they would pay and have a choice between several payment options and payment plans.
And were you ever surprised by the number that came up, either positively or negatively?
I was actually a couple times.
In what way? In which direction?
Well, I told myself and I told everyone, it's just for a month. I'm going to stick to my guns. And so I told everyone, if we sit down and you want to pay me zero, as long as you can look me in the eye and tell me why you were giving me zero, you got everything for free. And so I was actually expecting that. Luckily, I never had to deal with that. Wow. Everyone actually, the three criteria that I had people decide on was, one, what they felt the legal services were worth. Two, how well they felt that I did my job. And three, I wanted them also to base it off of what they could afford as well. So, each person differed on all three of those criteria, particularly on what their ability to pay was. And what surprised me was there were some people that I worked with a couple clients that I actually had a pre-existing relationship for a while, but price had always been an issue for me, helping them out because I knew they were in some dire straits. And actually, once they actually paid, they actually ended up paying more than I had actually talked to them before about charging. Once they actually went through the process, saw how important the legal work was, and saw how well I did my job. And they still paid lower than what my market rate was. But that was actually buoyed by a couple of people I worked with, paid actually several times higher than what I usually charge. So it was all over the board, and then it actually averaged out to probably about 70% of what I usually charge.
And was the volume greater as a result?
Yes, I definitely had an increase in volume. There was actually a lot of curiosity about it. I got a lot of calls from people who were just curious, and then once we met, they actually went through the system once they saw how it worked.
Wow! And so how did that experiment? And we should note that experiment is inspired in part by the philosophy of Matt Holman, author of the Non-Billable Hour blog, and who's innovative in thinking about lots of these issues. And so I just wanted to note, how did that experiment help develop your practice in other ways, if it did?
It really gave my clients a little bit of skin in the game when I actually talked to them about my services. I've never had clients be so honest about what I did well and what I needed to improve on. And, I think they kind of felt that part of the payment, since they knew in a lot of ways they were paying what they could afford, which was probably cheaper than a lot of attorneys they would have worked with. A lot of them really took to heart that they wanted to be honest and really help me build the practice that they would like to work with and what their friends would like to work with. So a lot of things that came up was, first of all, a lot of them felt that law firms in general are overpriced. They know that the work is important, and actually once they worked with me, they felt that legal planning they did was more important than they even thought it was. But they still felt that most legal services, when they did their price research before coming back to me, was overpriced. So that kind of helped get an idea of, I knew my firm was competitive based off of other law firms, but that really helped. The biggest thing I want to learn is what is actually affordable for my target client. And so that led to a lot of discussions and really figuring out how and where to put my legal fees to essentially be the best for me as far as, living and keeping a continuing healthy business, but also helping my clients and getting the most clients that I can based off of that affordability. The second thing that actually came up, this is what surprised me, is clients started talking about just what services they wanted with a law firm. And the biggest thing that came up is clients told me, they wanted a law firm that they could just call up with what they felt were their stupid questions or their quick questions that they would avoid calling a lawyer for because they didn't want to pay the prices. And this came up particularly with one specific client who had a legal issue, and it had actually been sitting around for about a year until he saw my Name Your Own Price month, came in and talked to me about it, and realized that had it not been the Name Your Own Price month, it would have been a very expensive problem for him to fix with most law firms. And in fact, it still was a fairly expensive problem for him to fix just because all the other things involved. And he told me a story about how probably about every week for the past year, he's been thinking, I should call a lawyer about this. I should call a lawyer about this. But he didn't know who he could call without having to pay them. He thought a couple $100 just to answer the question.
So how did you solve this?
Well, what I've started working with my clients on is I'm now trying actually a subscription service with my law firm and I took a lot of the issues that clients wanted to see, and then I looked at my business model and looked at what I needed as far as revenue coming into the firm and what my time constraints were as far as working with clients. And I sat down with a couple of them, and actually two clients particularly actually helped me develop the subscription plan that my firm now offers, which essentially, for a small monthly rate, you get unlimited phone and email consultations and at least quarterly in-person consultations with your attorney. So you can call with any question, whether it's 2 minutes or 2 hours, and that's included in the monthly price. And then you also get discounts up from the firm for actual legal representation and legal work if you need it. And that helps take the cost down from what I need in my business model to essentially just continue growing my firm to what people generally said they thought was an affordable market rate for the prices for the services that I offered at the time.
Innovation in law firm practice. Awesome. So do you have any advice for prospective solos?
Try something different. The biggest problem that I have as a solo is law firms aren't doing very well right now. We all know that, and a lot of it is because particularly large law firms, but most law firms are still operating off a business model that's 20 or 30 years old or even more than that. And what a solo practitioner can do is we actually have an advantage is we don't have that bureaucracy and we don't have that red tape where we can try something new, take a little bit of a risk, and if it doesn't work, we can end it. If it does work, we can continue to expand on it and find new ways of actually offering our services and working with clients that makes us competitive against larger firms that have better marketing budgets, more specialized attorneys, and are able to essentially compete on more traditional business aspects.
How can people get in touch with you to find out more?
Well, they can go to my website. It's www.alexbajwa.com. That's B-A-J-W-A. Most people have trouble spelling that, so I give it to everybody. Or they can send me an email at abajwa@alexbajwa.com. Or I always love phone calls too.
Okay. This is Ari Kaplan speaking with Alex Bajwa, a solo practitioner in St. Paul, Minnesota, who has been experimenting with reinventing the practice of law and achieving results. Thanks so much, Alex.
It was a pleasure, Ari.